Hey guys, welcome back to the Results Junkies podcast. After a week on the road, Mr. Singh is back and ready to catch up on things. How was your time away, Mr. Singh?
It was nice. So two things. Number one, it's been a while since I've done a cross country like that,
Uh-huh.
and the 3 hour time difference over a 2 or 3 day trip was a little bit more difficult than I remember it being. The second thing is, Dana and I haven't been to Vegas since the tech tour, so probably 8, 9 years ago. And
Oh
back then
wow, yeah.
we were driving,
It was
so like
2016, I think. Yeah.
yeah, so we were driving and stuff like that. And when we flew back, Dana was like, she said something where she was like, hey, I don't know if it was just if it's the newness of just getting back from a nice trip, but she was like, Vegas has a lot going for it. Like, everything was within walking distance. We stayed at the Cosmopolitan, so you could just sort of like walk wherever
Yep.
you had to. Ubers
Yep.
are easy to get to. It feels like unlimited food choices are everywhere.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, are we saying we're going there once or twice a year? And she was like, yeah, we might be saying that. But
Disney World,
but
but
to be
for
clear,
adults.
I didn't think it was not going to be good. By the way, I just
Mhm.
I've always, I guess in my mind, always thought of like the gambling and that stuff. It just doesn't do anything for me. But the ability to like go to a spa and pick a fast food joint just as easily as picking a 1 or 2 star Michelin restaurant, it was just you get a lot of choices there. And let's not even get started on the people watching. By the way, the people
People
watching is
watching is incredible, and I would
arguably the best part.
and I would argue that writing $25,000 checks and $50,000 checks into companies that have a white paper and 17 lines of code can provide some of the same dopamine hits as a
Yeah,
winning hand of blackjack. So
yeah. The I will okay, one side note, the amount of money though there is it's just so hard to I don't mean to like say this in any detrimental way to somebody else, but like we were sitting down for dinner at this one place, pretty decent place, and a young couple sat down next to us, and I don't mean to judge, probably about 20 years old. Could not, I mean, clearly they were 21 because they ordered a $4,000 bottle of champagne. I don't know much about. Okay, this is embarrassing. I'm just going to say this. I don't know how much you've used. So, like I know we're going to talk about AI today, but on Apple, if you double press the side button,
mhm.
you get into visual search.
Yeah,
I'm not going to lie. One of my first uses of this was to take a picture of the purse that this young man brought that had its own chair. There was a little chair, and it's not for like humans. It was a little chair for his purse to sit on.
mm.
And I was like, I got to figure out what the hell this is. So I like do this little side photo thing using the AI search on my phone. Yeah, definitely like a $20,000 Louis Vuitton, which I'm not judging the guy, but like I know at 21, I was measuring my economic footprint in whether or not I could, get a Wendy's number 7 or something like that. I was not sitting at this particular restaurant and walking around with a bag like that. So,
Well, in fairness, the last time you were in Vegas, you were rifling through a bag of cash that I had. So it would seem that cash in Vegas are obsessions for you to some degree.
I feel like that might still be the only sore subject we have between you and I. I have never seen your anger until the day I tried to post that picture to Instagram or
Mm.
Snapchat or something like that, probably 10 years ago.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It was a moment. It was definitely a moment. Where'd you guys end up dining? I'm curious.
So that particular day for my birthday, we did Joel Robuchon. We did
Nice, very nice.
the tasting menu. It's definitely a once in a lifetime kind of thing. Really incredible. And then the next night, we nothing fancy. We did a quick dinner at oh gosh, it was the Japanese place right there in the Cosmopolitan.
Zuma or Din Tai Fung?
Zuma. That's it. That's
Ah,
it. So we did
yeah.
Zuma that night. So
I really like
um,
Zuma.
it was nice. Yeah, we
Yeah.
did. We did the omakase. Did it
Mm,
pulled up right to the little bar right there, and
yep, yep.
that was incredible. Maybe I'm just not cultured. Maybe I've just been in the thick
Maybe.
of having lots of young kids for a long time. But the A5 Wagyu, oh man, like it was really the first time I got to enjoy it. It
Yeah,
was
it's
in
pretty
both of the
awesome.
tasting menus on both of the
Yeah,
restaurants we went to. It was just
yeah.
like, and I'm sure everybody else has tried it before, but again, we're coming out of that stage where it's like, hey, one of the kids didn't finish their chicken tenders. Let's just knock
Yeah,
that
yeah,
back.
yeah. Well, they used to, and I don't know if they do this in the tasting menu, but they used to offer the A5 Wagyu, and they would bring you a hot stone so you could sear it to the temperature you
No, they didn't
wanted.
do
So,
that, but that would
yeah,
have been cool. Although
yeah,
I would have been terrified, I think. I feel like I'd overcook that.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. You definitely don't want to overcook it. That's for sure.
yeah. It was
Well,
wonderful though, man. It was wonderful. But that 3-hour time zone difference got me coming
yeah.
back.
Well, Cosmo
So
is a great place to stay. It definitely is. It's usually not altogether cheap, but it is a great place to stay.
really enjoyed it, as
Yeah.
part of the Marriott thing and
Yeah.
got a decent upgrade. I thought one of the interesting like revenue opportunities they had is they sent an email like 3 days prior and they said something like, hey, for $50 or something like that, we'll give you
Yeah.
guaranteed early check-in.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, yeah, well, let's do that.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Yeah. Well, a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll dig into our topics here. So, showresultsjunkies.com is the email address. How you find us? He is at Paul Singh on all those social media channels. I am at Pizza in Motion. We're going to talk about updates to the Google Chrome divestiture, but before that, Paul has jumped into the pool and is now a paying recipient of AI services. I think you signed up for ChatGPT, or was it something else?
Yeah, I did. I signed up for ChatGPT and I again, like I'm not for or against it. I just didn't really quite understand the use cases.
Sure.
And what's been interesting is that it didn't start for me because of work. Like it was really more like, um, hey, summarize this. I think I was getting a bunch of investor updates from a bunch of different companies, and just out of curiosity, over the last couple of weeks, I've been just dumping the PDFs or cutting and pasting the text into ChatGPT and saying, "Tell me the key tidbits here, and what are the underlying tones, of the update." And never really thought anything of it. And then a couple days ago, I was working on a larger meeting agenda that I'm putting together for a team on site, and just out of the blue, and there's nothing like confidential. I was just like, oh, let me just cut and paste this in. And in the prompt, I said like, hey, I'm having these people join me at this meeting, um, and here's the agenda for the week. Tell me what I'm missing here, and it pointed out little interesting bits like, hey, you didn't budget enough time to walk over to that restaurant. Like it understood the context. It could see like,
Yeah.
okay, but here's the thing. Even then I had not hit the minimum. So apparently I don't know the right numbers, but I think you have like a limit of like 40 searches a day or something in the free account. I never hit any of those limits. Where it got interesting was is that I was at one point I was like looking at, okay, for $20 a month, what do I get? Because I was thinking about
Yeah.
this because you had paid the $200. And I'm like, what do I get for $20? And the interesting thing was it was speed. So, for example, when I had it do the updates to this agenda,
Hmm.
anecdotally, it must have taken a minute. So I would like just do something, I'd type something in, and then I just knew in my head it would take like a minute. So I'm like, okay, I'll
Yeah.
go check my email. And I saw on the like pricing thing, you get like more access to compute time or whatever it was. And I was like, for $20, let me try it. And for me, that difference between like wait a minute, whatever,
Yeah.
and it adds up, versus like, hey, let's just pay 20. I figured let's try it. And it was actually super fast. And so anyway, I'm still in my first month, it's month to month. You can cancel it.
Yeah.
But I am interested to see what happens next month because iOS 18.4 is coming out next month and Siri is already integrated with ChatGPT. So I am interested to see. I don't know that I'll keep it. I don't know that I'll cancel it within the first month because I think I've gotten more value in the last week than the $20 I paid.
Right.
But I am curious to see how much more useful it potentially becomes once iOS 18.4 comes out next month. So
Yeah.
we'll see. I for $20 it was worth a try, and I'm not like regretting it yet. Yet maybe.
Yeah, I think you mentioned me signing up for the $200 service. We talked about that last week. I'm almost certainly going to cancel when we get to the end of 30 days. I have a calendar reminder set for that. You know, I, I'll be interested to see what's the right way to say it. Like, because your point, like, I think you can get $20 in value out of it, but I think to some degree, at least for where I am with these tools so far, is do they become a part of my workflow, or or is it stretching to use them? And I'll give you an example of something that I used ChatGPT for this week that ultimately failed. So United made a change to lifetime status for million milers, last week, and drove a stake in my heart because I just finished my million miler status on them. And so there are all sorts of shades and levels of my bitterness as I stand right now. But I wanted to try and take a step back and I wanted to look at the data. And so I asked ChatGPT to go find the most recent four. I started with the first one and I say, find me the most recent four conference call transcripts from United's earnings reports, and I want you to provide me any references for the words premium, upgrade, upgrades, or first class. And it failed pretty miserably at it. And I ended up having to search them myself. It did come up with a couple of references. I asked it to search entire transcripts. I asked it to provide all references, and it did neither. And so it also took a little bit. There was some learning experience in there for me. I put the words I wanted in quotations first, and it didn't find any of them. And
Mm.
so then when I removed the quotations, it found some. What I'll probably go back and try and create a list, maybe in point or something like that. But I think what I'm finding so far is that from a research standpoint, it's not as thorough as I'd like to be because it missed the one key comment, which there was a key, like a Q2 of last year, that they had seen a 10% increase in the number of domestic first class seats or domestic premium seats that they're selling. And
Yeah.
that was the key piece of data I was looking for, and it never pulled that. So other CEOs, airline CEOs, talk about that stuff on a more regular basis than United does once I read through the 4 transcripts. But it did seem like ChatGPT was still, I don't want to say cheating, if you will, or not summarizing, but I don't
It
know.
was incorrect for you. Yeah.
It was it
Yeah.
was it was incomplete for sure, and I wasn't using the $200 deep research tool because there's a button. So in ChatGPT, I have a button right below my prompt window that says deep research. So I wasn't using deep research. So I'll be interested when I drop down to the $20 plan just to run things like that, to see how often the task is completed because you've noted some things that again I think are positives and are to your point, if it does any one of those things, it's worth the
Yeah.
$20. But my behavior still isn't trained to go use the tools often because a certain number of times I'm using the tool, it's not giving complete information. And it's not
Yeah.
telling me it didn't give it. That's not saying I couldn't find references. It's saying it
Yeah.
served up
It's
all the
like you have
references.
to find the error, or
Yeah,
you have to find.
right.
Yeah.
And that's the tough part.
That's fair. I mean, even in my limited use over the last week, there are little issues. So, for example, I need to go make a customer visit to a particular customer of ours. It's in a rural area, and so I
Uh,
said, find me the closest airport to this city state that is
right.
served by United Airlines. And it gave me a couple airport codes, and they were all very small regional airports. So I would just open a new tab, punch the 3-digit code into Google Flights, and see what I could find. 10% of the time, it was giving me airport codes that definitely were not serviced by.
Mm,
Now, to be fair, I didn't maybe specify like, hey, next week. Maybe it was
right.
using
Right.
last summer's flight schedules. I don't know. But to your point, yeah, that's fair. Like I wish it would just like, and I'm just visual, right? I wish it would like maybe even give you a visual cue of, hey, I'm only 10% certain of this, but maybe I'm
Right.
99% certain about that. Something like that would be very interesting.
Well, or to
Um,
your point, I think you bring up a good point because if you remember, like the very first versions of this stuff, they were not searching the most recent search queues of the internet. They were looking at, they
yeah,
had pulled 2019 data or 2020 data or whatever. And they had been very public about that. To
yeah,
your point, they might not be searching the most current data, but they're not telling you that they're not searching the most current data.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. And so I think like, I I think that the interesting, and now again, only a week into this, right? So
Yeah.
ask me again in a month or two. But I, it's interesting to me that a week ago I kind of had some rough idea of how I envision maybe even our staff at Strata using AI tools to maybe become more efficient.
Yeah.
On the one hand, I feel like a week into this, I feel like I probably have a better idea now.
Yeah. Yeah.
On the other hand, maybe the rest of it would be I still don't know what's possible. Like for example, I can see maybe the potential benefits of having an AI assistant for all of our engineers. It helps you write better code. It's not going
Yeah.
to write the code for you necessarily. I know a lot of people talk about it doing that, but maybe basically providing like a tool that would allow engineers to be more efficient. I can totally see that. On the
Yeah.
flip side, it's more like what are some of the micro tasks that the other 40 people on our team, you know, need help with that is not necessarily code. And in my case, like a meeting agenda, which I know sounds like such a basic thing, but it probably saved me. I estimate it saved me 2 to 3 hours of back and forth of just re-reviewing stuff.
Yeah.
And then, well, I think it's just interesting. And I think like I feel like I was already pro whatever, but I think I'm even more pro like meaning I'm more in favor of like trying these kind of models
Yeah.
out to see where it goes.
Well,
I I
the
will
example you give about, you going through your agenda, that's not one that I would have thought of, and so I think this gets back to, I know it's probably just, you're probably just a tad young for this, Mr. Singh, but I remember
these
when.
gray hairs would disagree with you right here,
Yeah,
but okay.
right, yeah. Yeah, in the days that, AOL was hitting some level of prevalence, by that point, everybody sorta had a way to search the internet. But
Yeah,
prior to that, I remember I had, before I had AOL, I had banking software with Citibank back in the day. We lived in New York, and it would just dial directly into the bank software, and I'd hear the modem
right.
screeching in the background and all that stuff. And if you got onto the internet, there really weren't search engines. You sorta had to know where you were going, and you would, like, people would tell you websites that you should visit. Hey, you should check out this really cool website that does this thing. And
Yeah,
so you'd write the website down and you'd go to it. And so I feel like we're in that era of these AI models where it's like, hey, hey, have you thought about using it to idiot proof your meeting agenda? I think the example I gave you a few weeks ago was one of my colleagues had fed a bunch of data into it and said, show me, kick me out a line graph for
yeah,
the price of these things relative to these partners.
yeah. I I might regret saying this. Okay, well, let me say something or explain something first, and then I might regret saying this. For me, one of the most difficult parts of embracing tools like this has really been trying to unlearn 15 years of Google searches. So, for
Yeah.
example, I'm used to just like maybe I want a product review. In the context of a product review, mentally, I know I typically type Reddit space product space
Right.
review, and then that'll give me hopefully a human written version of what I'm looking for. It sounds so ridiculous, but having to then unlearn that and go into a ChatGPT prompt and say, "Give me reviews of product
Yeah.
within the last 6 months from average users," or, whatever. That's just a weird, subtle thing, just unlearning that. But now here's the part I might regret. I find myself as I use more and more of, like, these AI tools, I find myself more and more understanding that I could see how voice could be faster than typing. Like, when we think about I mean, I was it's a bad joke in our house, like, we have these 8 or 9 Amazon dots running throughout the house, and Dana said to me last night, she's like, "Hey, can you just turn off those lights?" And the bad joke is, she's like, because Alexa never listens to her anyway. So, you know, the technical nerd in me is like, "Well, yeah, of course, because, like, we've got this behind the trash can or that's, whatever." But, like, for the average consumer, voice interfaces have not been that great, for everything that we've
That's
looked at. I
fair.
mean, even Siri sucked for a long time.
Still
Um,
does.
yeah, it still does. But, as you think about, like, the conversational prompts you have to put into to the prompts. I'll just give you a small example. At one point in one of my prompts, I was like, "Hey, how should I be thinking about X?" And it said something like, "Well, for upsells and whatever it was, upsells and cross sells, you need to think about X." And so I responded with, "Yeah, but we don't have upsells at Strata. It's all about revenue expansion." And I just typed that in, and then it adjusted all of its output. But that's something if I just said verbally, I think would have been even faster. So
Yeah.
well, we'll see how that goes because I couldn't do that in a coffee shop, like I wouldn't want to say that out loud in a coffee shop, but sitting in
Right,
my
right.
office here, I wouldn't be opposed to it like, "Hey, you type it out, let me just say something back to you." That could be interesting.
Yeah, no, that part I definitely agree with. I do, and I think we'll continue to find these uses.
How quickly have we gone from do you remember when guys would wear Bluetooth, and you'd be
Yes.
like, "Okay,
Yeah.
come on, you nerd. Like you're not on a call." They'd just be wearing Bluetooth. It was like a fashion statement almost 15 years ago. And now here we are wearing AirPods all day, and I hate to admit it, but I've got 2 pairs of AirPods because that way one can charge and the other can keep going. I've been doing that for 4 years now.
Yeah,
Just
I don't know that I would
it's
call it a
interesting how
fashion.
far we've come.
I don't know if I call it a fashion statement because I was the guy who used to wear a belt clip for my cell phone, the big fat belt clip with a big fat
Why
cell
am I not
phone with the
surprised, by the way?
pleated khakis too. So
Yeah, why
yeah,
not
there's a
surprising.
reason why my wife started dressing me, and I'm definitely better off because of it. All right, let's pivot away from my horrible
Yeah,
fashion
awkward,
choices
awkward, pivot. Let's go.
and talk a little bit more about Chrome. And unfortunately, I won't sing this time like I did in pre-show. Everybody gets to miss that one. But with a new administration, there is a new tact on the DOJ lawsuit filed against Google for the divestiture of Chrome, and it's sort of splitting this into two different buckets. What the DOJ has said, in very simplistic form, is hey, you know what? You still need to divest Chrome, but we're going to allow you to continue to invest in AI. And I want to specify there, I think there's one important point about this clarification by the DOJ. What it states is that Google still needs to give prior notification of any investments in AI. So it's not that it's not that this isn't on the radar. It's just that prior notification for future investments. My guess would be, that there will be some level of oversight and scrutiny on how much they're investing in AI. But the fact that Microsoft now seems to be pivoting away from their relationship with OpenAI and potentially diving in as well, I think there are enough big players here that I don't know that Google's in danger anytime soon of not being allowed to invest in AI.
Yeah, I admit that like most of this is way above my pay grade. What the DOJ decides or doesn't decide is way above anything I can influence. But I think this is a one to keep an eye on because most of the companies that you and I probably invest in depend on some amount of web traffic to support their business model. And I think just Chrome being one of the primary players, if not the primary player in most Google Analytics reports that I see right now,
Yeah,
what happens to Google Chrome will likely determine whatever the outcome is here could fundamentally cause some headaches for people that rely on web traffic and search traffic and stuff like that. By the way, for anybody that's going to call me out on this. By the way, obviously there's other things that could get in the way too, right? Like,
sure.
AI powered search or, whatever could surpass all this and make it moot. Who knows? But the point is, as it stands right now, most of the traffic on, for example, any of my sites or any of our, portfolio company sites are still predominantly Chrome. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here. Um, Speaking of which, by the
That's
way, I don't know if this is relevant, but I have noticed more recently that DuckDuckGo is advertising much more aggressively, but they're
hmm,
not like I don't think I've seen them in like major newspapers yet, but
yeah.
they're definitely hitting up like the Hulu ad targeting and stuff like that to hit households like mine.
Hmm,
So,
that's
it,
interesting. Yeah, yeah. And
it,
you said just to regroup there, you said that Chrome is still, just to be clear, Chrome is still the largest referral source or the largest browser that folks are
it's the
using.
largest browser. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, largest browser for
Yeah.
not only my sites, but also most of the companies that we invest in. Anybody that has any sort of like web traffic is predominantly going to get Chrome traffic.
Yeah.
Um,
And do you find that consistent across both Mac and Windows machines, or do you not see that level of granularity?
I could go pull the numbers for the sites I have access to, but anecdotally, I would say it's probably 80% of Windows machines and probably 60% of Macs,
Yeah. Okay.
probably.
All right. That's interesting.
But desktop, where it gets
Yeah.
different actually is like when you look at iPhone on the
Oh, I bet on mobile. I bet on mobile it
mobile is
skews
almost
very heavily
always
Safari.
Safari.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And it's weird that
So
because I like Safari's not my favorite browser, and yet I I don't recall that I've ever really moved that icon off of my home screen on my iPhone, nor have I made Google Chrome my default.
yeah. Well, that's a maybe a separate discussion, but the default is the standard usually. Like that's
Yeah.
the most powerful place you can. It's the reason why,
Yeah.
as you know, it's the reason why Google pays Apple so much money to be the default search engine.
For sure.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, nobody really changes the defaults. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens here. And again, it's way above my pay grade to influence any of the decisions. But you know, maybe this is a little bit of digital PTSD too, because nobody really saw the changes coming with like iOS 15 or whatever it was with Ask Not to Track,
Yeah.
and it feels like overnight decimated a lot of ad campaigns and a lot of marketing strategies. So
Yeah.
maybe it is like a digital PTSD here of any sort of change to the big players is worth watching.
Yeah. 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 Well, so when you think about that concept at a high level, I think, you know, there's this. I'm trying to think about how you like just when you put all these pieces together and you talk about where we've gone from ask app not to track to where we are today and whatever comes next in terms of the change. I think this likely ties back in some way, shape, or form to what the government is thinking or what the DOJ is thinking when they say that they're comfortable to some degree with Google continuing to invest in AI. I think if I'm reading the tea leaves there, the way I interpret that is what they're saying is, look, we think you have too much control over the present, but we want to make sure there are enough active competitors in the future. And so you've got OpenAI, ChatGPT, you've got Grok, you've got Claude, you've got Anthropic, you've got Microsoft is oh god, what's theirs called? Anyway,
Oh, yeah,
Project or
yeah,
whatever. Yeah, so
yeah,
like there's a number of players there, and they're probably not going to see a ton of consolidation. So maybe the DOJ sees a role for Google to continue to disrupt in that space and continue to make it better for consumers. So
yeah.
that's my 2 cents on why they've split this up to some degree and separated the baby from the bathwater, for lack of a better term.
Yep, yep. I think it'll be with regards to that whole ask permission for investments or whatever. I would be surprised if that goes through the way it's defined right now. I imagine there's gonna be a minimum cap or something like that, or because the thing is that could, if you make it a broad statement of, hey, you got to tell us or ask us every time you're going to make an investment, Google's own investment arm becomes a lot less competitive. Some might argue how much less competitive, like that's probably not true, but the thing is though, is that like if I'm working on something that requires, where I really want Google's money in, whether it's for compute
Right.
power or otherwise, maybe I don't want the noise of that getting out, So I imagine they're probably not going to strike that term entirely, but I imagine they're going to try to push the floor up. And maybe it's,
Right.
hey, if you're going to buy more than 5%, or maybe you're investing more than 5 million, it may be something like that. But
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to, and as you know, by the way, there's probably ways around this as well too. You could say, hey, instead of direct investments, they're going to invest as an LP in somebody else's fund and then use that.
Right.
There's all sorts of ways around this, right? But it'll be interesting to see where this goes, especially given this administration and sort of the way they're thinking about, you know, federal. I'm trying to pick my words wisely here. Federal involvement in private or public/private companies. So
Yeah,
we'll
I
see.
think it's fair to say at a high level that I think it's certainly plausible that the government is feeling their way through the investment and infrastructure piece of AI the same way you and I are feeling our way through how to maximize the $20 we're spending on the
Yeah,
consumer versions of the products. I think
yeah,
we're all trying to process what this looks like, and I think if you go back to the very early days of when AOL was a thing, I don't necessarily know that the government writ large was terribly focused on it.
yeah,
Certainly there were probably parts of the government, but this is this is big bucks, and this is I remember reading, so when I was looking researching for articles for this week's episode, I remember reading a bit about how somebody in Congress is proposing a bill to bar DeepSeek from any government device.
yeah,
DeepSeek being the Chinese Gen AI model that, in theory, moved much quicker than their competitors to their most recent bucket of learning. So you can see those things start to come out that are more granular and specific and concerning. Whether it's right or wrong. To be clear, I have no idea if DeepSeek should be on a government phone or not. It's more just saying there seems to be a lot of different ways the government is looking at AI right now, both from a prosperity standpoint and also from a security standpoint.
that's right. Yep, yep. Well, like I said, man, above all of our pay grades probably, but in the meantime, I'm going to keep testing this stuff.
Yeah,
I, sorry, not to go back to this point, as you can imagine, traffic in Northern Virginia. So I'm
sure.
driving the kids around a lot, and one of the things I am interested to try to test out a little bit more is the audio version. So there are in
Mm,
the plus version of ChatGPT, and I haven't tested this yet, but it's on my to do for this week. Is like normally when I'm driving around, if the kids are not in the car yet, I'll usually throw on a podcast, or maybe I'll do a work phone call or something like that. I am gonna try this idea of like regurgitating my thoughts via audio directly into it and see what it can do with it. I know I don't want to I know this episode's going to go out soon and I don't want to give away too much, but at the same time, for example, on any given day, I'm thinking about, high value sales prospects, maybe a challenge I'm having with somebody on the team or whatever. And I am curious to see if I can take just a brain dump, like, hey, I got this problem with this one employee. How do I think about it? And I'm not asking ChatGPT to maybe give me an answer, but maybe to see if it can help me unpack what I'm thinking. So I'm
yeah.
curious to see. Ask me again in a week, but I'm curious to see what else is possible. And again, if I get nothing out of this other than a better understanding of how these models can be used, I think it's still worth the $20 a month. So we'll see.
Well, and the good news is I think there's probably a pretty good chance I can ask you that again in a week.
I think there's a pretty good chance you will.
All right, Mr. Singh. Well, enjoy your spate of meetings over the next few days, and I will enjoy. I know this is going to come as a shock to you, but I will be headed west to the land of the mouse out there and taking my son to Disneyland for another special event out there.
I look forward to seeing a photo of Club 33, or at least the door of it, or something. We'll live vicariously.
I'm not sure what you're talking about, Mr. Singh.
Oh, we don't. Okay, rule number 1 of Fight Club. Got it. Okay. Yeah. All right, man. Well, safe travels. Have a lot of fun.
Thanks.